All right, here we go. Thank you for joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. My guest today is a co-host on the VOC Nation's network podcast called Wrestling with History, along with legendary wrestling journalist Bill Apter and former AWA and WWE announcer Ken Resnick. He also is the Chief Business Development Officer at Telesystem and hosts a bi-weekly leadership podcast called The Next Generation Leadership with Micah Rosales-Peterson. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the voice of choice, Mr. Bruce Wirt. Bruce, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on Bumps and Thumps.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'm honored that you reached out and thought of me. Thank you.
Well, you know, I started watching your podcast, Wrestling with History, with Bill Apter and Ken Resnick, and it was just, you know, getting those kind of guys on that show with you says a lot about you and what you do. So I really appreciate, again, your time and coming on here. So first,
Yeah.
I'd like to get into, if I could, growing up, where you grew up at, your family life, your schooling, that kind of thing. So where did you grow up at?
Sure. I'm from Philadelphia.
All right.
Actually, not when people say the city, people get, when you think Philadelphia, New York, and big cities, you think of big buildings. We were in the residential part of the city, working class neighborhood, actually on the poorer side growing up. So I didn't have a whole lot that the family didn't work hard for.
Yeah.
I, as a child, had a lot of hand-me-downs. So, you know, my clothes were also probably my uncle's clothes at one point in time. But, you know, my parents worked very hard to make sure that we didn't know that we were poor, and we had a great life and a great childhood. I have a brother. And, you know, foundationally, they instilled work ethic. So hard work, you can achieve anything you want to work for. I fundamentally believe in that, transcending all barriers. And, you know, I teach that in leadership in my business role. I think there's a lot of things that we have to overcome in society, but my belief in this country is that anybody can do anything that they want if they work hard enough at it. And that's a beautiful thing, because doesn't exist everywhere in the world, certainly. So I teach that, you know, I teach the never give up kind of thing. And I look at life as a pyramid of success, and the foundational part is your purpose. You have to know your purpose. You have to know what, I'll say God, but replace that with whatever you want intended for you to do on this earth. And then you have to have passion with your purpose that should intersect. So your passion might be fly fishing, and that's fine. But for me, my passion is public speaking. My purpose is leadership, and they go well together. And that kind of leads you into the other P's, as I say: perseverance, you know, never give up, work at everything you do, be positive, and be pliable. Anytime you do something new, you have to listen to others that have done it before, and that kind of leads you into being successful. The only thing that we can teach is skills, and that's at the very top of the pyramid, but the rest is usually on the person. So I think, and you hear my dog jingling in the background, so I apologize about that.
No worries.
But anyway, little off track, but that's my foundation, how I grew up. And it wasn't the best in school, but I got through it, and I'm a proud graduate of LaSalle University in the city of brotherly love.
All right. Well, okay. That's awesome. You know, I was a late bloomer myself. I didn't go to college until I was in my early 30s in the military. So as far as that stuff, I was the same way as you as far as schooling. So how did you get involved in the wrestling, your pro wrestling?
So I started my telecom career, I'll say it, my leadership career in 1999. Well, telecom career in 99, leadership 2001. And I originally went to school. I went to college for communications, and that's what I wanted to do. I was a big sports radio fan growing up. Actually, the first talk radio program that I fell in love with was called Wrestling Radio with Joel Goodhart. who was the promoter of the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance in Philadelphia. And that was a predecessor to ECW. And a lot of people don't realize that.
I did
But
not know that.
every Saturday morning on Sports Radio 610 WIP, Joel had an hour-long show from 8 to 9. And I was a little kid. And I didn't know anything about dirt sheets or where he was getting his news, but I knew that this guy could tell me things that would happen on syndicated television way before it happened, 1988, 89.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with the whole thing. And I thought, as a 10-year-old, this is, I'd love to do this someday. And then listening to that station, started to get into sports and, one thing leads to another. So that's what I wanted to do. Always was something that I had in the back of my mind. I got my first job at Comcast in 1999, thinking that I would work my way into the broadcast part of that, start in sales and work my way into the broadcast. Started making a lot more money than you'd make in broadcasting because I was selling. And I just kind of put that dream off. Yeah. And I'll fast forward 10 years, way out of Comcast at that point. I saw an opportunity to do internet radio and this is before podcasts were really a thing. It was called Voice America, and they were looking for hosts. And I didn't understand the gig or the game. They wanted you to pay a couple $1,000s for airtime. And I didn't know that was a scheme. So I convinced my brother to sponsor with his company, and we did this show. And I started sending it out to all of the radio stations in the area. And that's, I'll stop there and we can kind of continue the story as you wish. But that's kind of the genesis of how I got into broadcasting. And then I'll kind of go wherever you want me to from there.
Well, no, you covered I was going to ask you about your previous broadcasting experience, and you just kind of laid that out for us. So, I mean, I read in your bio a little bit that you used to work at a radio station in Philly and did some broadcasting there too. Okay. So was there any wrestling involved with that, or was that mostly?
Yeah. So it's a funny story. I'm active in a charity called Showtime Charities, where I do emceeing for their events, cancer benefits, children, underprivileged children, and children that are have health problems. Do a lot of events, and I've emceed for them for I don't know exactly how many years, probably close to 10. Yeah. And so keep that in the back of your mind. So I'm doing this internet thing with my brother. We had a 12-week run, and he wasn't going to continue to sponsor that show. So I'm sending out demo tapes to all the radio stations, and I get 2 at the same time that say, okay, you can, what kind of audience do you have? We can take you here. And I'll leave the name of the radio stations out. Okay. But I think they might be on my LinkedIn profile. But one was a station that is owned by Philadelphia Eagles broadcaster Merrill Reese. And I did a sports show there at night after the Phillies game, which was fun. It wasn't wrestling, but it was talking sports. And for me, as a kid that grew up loving Philadelphia sports talk radio, to work for the Philadelphia Eagles legendary broadcaster, work at that station, and be able to do sports talk radio was a dream come true. And so did that for a little while, and I started to, so Bill Apter was part of the same charity that I was in. Okay. So we would both take turns emceeing for this group, and getting to know Bill. I'd have Bill on my show. Unfortunately, that station had a pro wrestling talk show as well that aired on Saturday morning. So they didn't love the fact that I was doing that. Yeah. And I'll save some of the, I'll not say some of the back and forth that happened there, but I ended up going to WNJC 1360 Philadelphia, and we started a wrestling show. My co-host and I, Lamar Wells, and Albert Carabello. We did that at WNJC on Saturday mornings, and it started to pick up steam. And I talked to Bill, and I said, "Is One Wrestling interested in doing this together? I mean, we're on Philadelphia radio. You get the brand behind that, and would you want to do something? Come on with us regularly." Yeah. So, long story short, we started One Wrestling Radio, and that was at that station, and they ended up giving us drive time on, geez, it was so long ago now, it's 2010. I think it was Wednesdays. We did drive time from 5 to 7, and Bill started introducing me to all of these legends that he knew. And I started traveling with Bill to do conventions and record video for him and do interviews. And I started making good friends. And one of my closest friends in the wrestling business that still I talk to every year on his birthday for sure, and we do a lot together. I use him for telesystem stuff all the time, is Jimmy Hart.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy and I became close 10 years ago, and I mean, he's a treasured relationship. I'm so blessed to know him. He's just a great person and a good soul. And through Jimmy, I met Ken Resnick at an event called Sinomania in Philadelphia. So Ken became a friend. And I mean, there's a lot more, but those are the two with Bill that, you know, even when I stopped doing radio and podcasting for a number of years, those were people that off and on I'd stay in touch with.
Well, that's very interesting. Wow. So you kind of went into how you got involved with Bill Apter and Ken Resnick. So let's talk about how the project of Wrestling with History came together.
Sure. So you have to go back to, WNJC, we ran on there for 2 years solid, and we outgrew the platform. So we were doing more listeners than they could take on their, so you had the Philadelphia terrestrial radio, right? That's going out over the airwaves, but that was back really before podcasts were popular, and radio stations would stream over the internet as well. And we were getting a massive following all over the world that would hit this show, because we would have top guests. You know, nobody was asking for money at that point. Right. They were coming on because they had convention promoters would ask us to have their top super ticket people on to promote the convention. And we just really networked through that world pretty well. People like Terrence and James over at, what was their convention they had in New Jersey every year? It was up in Edison. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I do too. Sorry. I don't know.
But stuff like that. And we had everybody that's anybody, Hulk Hogan, Sting, Eric Bischoff. I mean, all of the top people got to do we were the promotion arm for Hogan and Friends when they were doing touring. They came to Philadelphia. So I worked with Brian Knobs to do the press for that. And, you know, we had Hogan on the air on WNJC, and pinch me moment for me, I got to pick Eric Bischoff up from the airport and drive him to Allentown. And that was cool because Eric and I, for a little while, stayed in touch. And when I was in Orlando a few times, I would text him and he would get me backstage. He got me great seats to TNA, and I got to go backstage. So, I mean, these are all things growing up as an 8-year-old, watching these people on TV. Mm-hmm. And then as a teenager watching in the Attitude Era, you're like, am I really living this right now? Yeah. And it's completely separate from my real world. So I'm still working in telecom. Yeah. I'm doing this on the side, and really we outgrew WNJC. We're doing, many times over 5 figures of listeners on the internet. And I said, the business model here makes sense. Let's take this to the cloud. Let's do streaming radio on the internet. And VOC Nation was born. So my drive time name was it's weird, and I'm not putting myself over, but I kind of accidentally said my first broadcast. I said, I'm your new voice of choice in the afternoon, and people started using that, so it kind of stuck. So that's the VOC and VOC Nation, and we set it up and we spent money. I think that's the thing about me is I don't do anything half-ass.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's okay to say here.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And I don't always make the best. Sometimes my decisions with this stuff, not in telecom, but in this stuff, are with my heart because it's something that I'm passionate about and I believe in. So we spent a good deal of money to build a pretty good infrastructure. And, at one point, I think podcast wise, we were number one for a long time. We had lots of great guests, lots of good talent. We were getting, in the genesis of podcasts, I had Chaz Warrington doing his show on VOC Nation. Shelly Martinez, who's still with us, did a show. I'll miss people, so I'll stop naming names. But anyway, it was great. But it was still really tough, Brian, to make money.
Yeah.
Because podcasting wasn't what it was today.
Yeah.
And people didn't trust the numbers, and it was just tough. And I was running a full career, had 2 divorces in between before I got to my current marriage. No kids with those divorces, thankfully. But so I stepped away in 2014 after doing it for 5 years. I felt at that point like I had done everything I wanted to. I met everybody I had ever dreamed of meeting. I made some great friends, and Brady Hicks, who writes for Pro Wrestling Illustrated,
I know,
and had his own podcast called In the Room. We made a deal, and we merged the networks, and Brady came in and ran the whole thing.
Wow.
And that at that point, I stopped investing. We scaled all the way back to the bare minimum, and he kind of kept it running, to his credit, without a whole lot coming in. I mean, we had some advertisers, but it wasn't what it once was. It wasn't the machine that it was. So I'll stop there and give you a chance.
I was just going to say, I didn't realize you were basically the founder, if I'm hearing you correctly, of VOC Nation, which is something to say because you were pretty young when that was up and coming. I mean, you're not that old now. I'm just saying, for a guy that in probably his early 30s or late 20s, starting something like that with that kind of money you were talking about is something to say. And kudos to you.
My retirement probably misses that money. Divorces plus, I mean, I added it up at one point. Again, multiples of 10 figures to do that. And, the other thing we were doing is we were traveling. So I would work 5 days a week as a telecom executive. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'd be somewhere in the country emceeing a convention for wrestling. Wow. And it was nuts. And the thing for me was I always felt like I've been blessed to have the means a lot of times. So I would foot the bill, and I would bring along, other people that worked with us for free. And that was sometimes, you ever hear of the word codependent, where sometimes you do it because you think you're doing something good. And then over time you start to think about, well, does this person appreciate it? And all on me, right? Because I went through that emotional battle of, and I had my feuds over the years because of it. And it was, at the end of the day, it was all me. Like, I chose to do this. I chose to pay this money. I chose to do that. And these people didn't do anything to me other than say, sure, I'll go, I'll do this. And so thankfully all that stuff is healed. It was a big part of why I needed to step away for 4 or 5 years. And then in 2019, Brady and I got together, and it was one of those points where I said, podcasting is getting to be big again.
Mhm.
I think I'll either invest and we make this thing back into what it was, or let's kill it and stop worrying about it. And for better or for worse, Brian, here I am back deep in the thick of it, and we built back up VOC Nation. It took a couple years, but we're back on the charts in all of the major countries, and we're not Conrad Thompson, but I think I used to joke. Tom Pritchard is somebody that I would acquaintance or friend. At least he knows who I am, and I talked to him a lot over the years. I always joke and I say I'm the original Bruce of podcasting. Your brother is second.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, it sounds like you've done, I mean, for me, when I first started, which was back in August of last year, I only came up with it because it was during the pandemic, and I was working with the Royals still, but I needed something else.
Sure.
And I love wrestling. I always have. You can ask my wife. I always have. You ask my mom. I loved it. So I said, I'm going to reach out. My first interview was with Greg Gagne.
Awesome.
Okay. I did 2 of them with him because we got cut off. But I reached out to him on email, and it was 5 minutes he replied. I was expecting a couple days, whatever, and replied right away. And then I set up an agenda, kind of like we did.
Yeah.
And from there, I kind of go. Now, I've hit some bumps in the roads. We'll talk about that with you too. When you reach out to somebody, a wrestler, and they say, well, I need X amount of bucks. I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not Conrad Thompson. I can't do that. And I've had a few of them say, well, I need X amount of dollars to come on your show. And these guys, not to be mean here, but they haven't been on the scene for, 15, 20 years that I've reached out to. Have you had that kind of?
Yeah. And see, when we first started doing it, they were all happy because what they were doing is they were making money from the convention. The promoters would bring them in to do the autographs and the pictures. And that was just part of the gig is we need to promote this convention, get fans to go to it. So, you're doing this show, you're doing these shows. And so that's the way it was. And nobody ever asked for anything. Mm-hmm. Over time, and I think the pandemic accelerated this. People during the pandemic, conventions weren't going on.
Right.
Unfortunately, I mean, and it's sad. A lot of these guys, because there's no retirement fund for professional wrestlers. True. So they made their money signing autographs and taking pictures, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And when the pandemic hit, all that stuff shut down. So how do these guys make money? They have to reinvent themselves, and they say, well, if I'm going to do these podcasts, I want X or Y. And here's what happened. When I came back, and Brady and I talked about coming back, I felt like there's a lot of work, as you know, to book guests every week.
Yeah.
And Ken and I, Wrestling with History didn't start with Bill. I ended up, when One Wrestling closed down, it was important for me to make sure Bill still had a wrestling home. And he was part of my start. So that was easy for me to put Bill on the payroll at VOC Nation and bring him into the fold. But Wrestling with History just started with Ken and I, and we kind of burned through Ken's Rolodex of guests. And I never wanted to do it again because I don't have the time. Yeah. And VOC Nation at that point in the beginning wasn't making enough to support a staff. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just something that if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it where somebody else's burden. And then, Conrad's doing his thing. And I'd say this about Conrad Thompson. I have a ton of respect for what he's built. Mm-hmm. He's great at the business side of it. I don't know how many hours he pours into all this recording that he does, but God bless him.
Yeah.
And I think what he did for this industry that you and I are part of is he reinvented it because it became about storytelling.
Yeah.
And I love that concept. And, you know, I think that he was a trendsetter. And I thought, well, let's not book guests anymore. Let's tell stories. Let's take different years or different people and tell stories about your backstage, and you lived the business in the time that was the hottest time, 84, 83 to 89. You were there. Yeah. And then eventually we added Bill, and it became bigger. Yeah. And, you know, then it became, I ended up doing it Manny Fernandez's show with the same thought. Mm-hmm. So that's my thing is, I'd rather tell the stories where our tagline is, we take people behind the scenes of the greatest moments in pro wrestling history. Yeah. And I want to do that because I think fans are craving that. They want to know not just the dirt sheet version, but this guy was there and he's a good guy. So he's not lying to you. Right. Bruce may lie to you. Bruce, not me, but Bruce Pritchard has an angle because he still works and gets a paycheck from McMahon. But Ken's not going to lie to you because he doesn't have to.
Yeah. That's great. You know, I did a podcast with Bill Apter back in October. Okay. Again, I was surprised that he even said yes, because he don't know me from Adam. You know, he doesn't know who I am. All he asked is if I read his book. I bought his book. I read it. I thought it was
wrestling is wrestling real, or no? What is it? Is wrestling fixed?
I didn't know it was broken.
I didn't know it was. Good.
And I actually tried to catch him one time during the podcast. I said, "Is wrestling broken?" I didn't know it was fixed. And then he caught it. He said, "No, it's," and I said, "I know, I was just kidding." Yeah. Just seeing if he was paying attention. But great interview, great guy. You know, your other partner, Ken, I'd love to get him on here sometime. But I don't know. Figure that out later. Anyways, you know, because I watched him as a kid, you know, on AWA Wrestling. Yeah. It was Gene Okerlund, him, Roger Kent. I even saw, I was real little, Marty O'Neill. You know, I grew up in Wisconsin, you know, and I was only a couple hours from Minneapolis, and then come over every week on Sunday mornings before I went to Sunday school. I would watch AWA or All-Star Wrestling. Yeah. And, you know, you look at it now as like, you know, the production, but it didn't matter. Back then it was about the wrestling, the interviews, you know, were, you know, you believed them. Hey, this guy's going to kick this guy's hind end, or vice versa. You know, back then you didn't know they were best friends in the back for the most part. You believe that they're going to hurt this guy or going to try to do the best they can. And, I don't know about you, and I kind of want to get into that. Wrestling from today, from the past, I think it's kind of more of it's a lost art of what they did back then to now. Now it's 30 minutes of WWE showing the Miz show, or, you know, something like that and you don't see those jobbers anymore, hardly ever. I mean, especially on WWE. Can you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So that was another thing when I came back in 2019 to do this. I said to Brady, I can't stomach a show. I don't want to have to watch wrestling because I mean, I'm a casual watcher. I'll watch the big pay-per-views, but I don't follow it like I did. I don't like the new product. Yeah. Flips and flops aren't really my thing. It's like some type of choreographed dance fighting. And I liked it when I could, even in the 90s, I could still suspend my disbelief. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny because when Bill came on, Bill wanted to take the first hour of each show and talk about what was happening. And I said, the thing that I think we're doing people a disservice if we do that, Bill, because they're looking at Dave Meltzer or Wade Keller or 411 Mania or Wrestling Inc. That's where they're getting their instant reaction to what's happening on TV. And those people are a lot better at it than
Yeah.
Maybe you're up on it, Bill, but I'm not. Ken's not.
Yeah.
So let's tell stories where the value is. So yeah, Brian, to me, wrestling was golden from 84 to 91, and it went into the crapper from 91 to like 96.
You
and
could have said
then,
the other word.
you
It's
know,
okay.
Tri-State Wrestling. Joel Goodhart started TWA in 88, maybe. And TWA ran Philadelphia Metro down through Delaware, and they hardcore wrestling at its finest. And out of the ashes of Tri-State Wrestling and Ringmasters Wrestling School became Eastern Championship Wrestling with Todd Gordon. And Todd struggled, and Paul Heyman picked up the ashes of that. So it grew into ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, and that gave us the Attitude Era and what we got out of WCW. And a lot of people don't know that story. If it wasn't for Joel going all the way back for me, I don't think any of that would have happened. But that got me back into it. I wasn't an ECW fan, but I loved the Monday Night Wars. And
the Monday Night Wars.
I think in the early 2000s is when when John Cena became a thing. It was insulting in the sense that people are booing the ever loving crap out of him, and I'm listening to announcers talk about how much the people love him, and and I'm like, this just they're trying to sell me on something that's not there, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
So that's when and that's when it really became just a production, not sport anymore.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you. The Monday Night Wars, to me, I mean, I was in my late 20s when that started. And Monday night was my night for the television. I said, I'm watching.
Yeah.
I'd flip back and forth, TNT and the USA, I think it was, and back and forth. And it kind of fizzled out for me. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It's about an hour from Eldon, Missouri. That's where originally we're a World League Wrestling organization, Harley Races promotion. And I got hooked on that. I would go down to Springfield, Eldon, wherever they were at. I'd drag my wife with me. And actually I had a boxed figure still with Harley in there. And we were walking from the parking lot out, and I saw him in the truck, and I just kind of pointed, and I said, I got to get his autograph. Harley waved me over to his truck, and he says, would you like me to sign that? And I said, I would love it. So I had a magic marker. He signed it 8 times, world champion, Harley Race. And
awesome.
Gave it back to me, and I got kind of started on it again. Now I live out in the sticks right now, so it's hard to watch it. I watch it on YouTube a little bit, but I'm not an avid fan like I used to be. And I talk to people like you to get your perspective on it, because I'm kind of in the same boat. It's not what it used to be. It's a lot of eye candy versus the action. I mean, I enjoyed some of the interviews, but it's more I'm like you. I don't want to see dancing for an hour and a half and then 20 minutes of wrestling.
And I thought AEW would be different than it ended up being, but I think it's become a hybrid of like WCW and TNA married together. It does have some semblance of appeal. I'm not insulting them. I think what they did is fantastic, and that competition will end up making the industry better.
Yeah.
And or they'll fuse together. I still think WWE is just waiting for the opportunity to pounce and suck them up, and they'll be part of the network as well.
I'll tell you, the guy I like right now in AEW, is Chris Jericho.
Yeah.
I like him. I always have, even when he was in WCW, WWE. He always just has, to me, that he knows how to wrestle. He knows how to talk. He has his inner circle right now, and it's not overdone per se. I mean, he does it the right way, what they allow him to do. But it's one of the few that I actually would watch, and I've watched him for 30 years, you know, since he started. I mean, he's the same age I am. He's 50 years old. And
Sure.
I think he's great. I've always liked the guy, and I think he's kind of why he was the first champion in AEW. I think he should be champion again. I mean, I don't disregard Kenny Omega whatsoever, but I think just Chris Jericho is more the guy to me. Marketable, believable, knows the craft, knows what to do, puts people over when they need to be put over, things like that. That's kind of a lost art too, putting people over, to me.
Sure.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that. It's kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I'm not a fan of 50-50 booking. I think that was the thing about, you mentioned jobbers, but squash matches help to make stars. And, you know, the syndicated shows, and I know that the business was different. It was about putting these guys on TV so that people would go out and buy tickets to the house shows. Right. But the syndicated shows, those squash matches made those guys larger than life, guys and girls, larger than life characters. And now it's like, okay, you know, I'm going to go out, win this week, I'll lose next week, I'll win this week, I'll lose next week. And there's no mega stars, and there's no name on the marquee that you would really go to see. They're not making that person anymore. Like, I'll build up, Vince McMahon says, I'll build up Braun Strowman, and then once he gets there, I'll knock him back down, and I'll build up Roman Reigns, and then I'll knock him back down. And that's one part. The other part is, I mean, there's doing the job. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because it's almost, I think it was more of a problem maybe 20 years ago when you had the big personalities of that era, the Hogans, the Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Steve Austin, you know, brother, that doesn't work for me kind of mentality. But, you know, with AEW, I think probably too many voices in booking, and just, you know, it's not, and I don't like the writers in WWE. I think wrestling people should write wrestling stories.
Yeah, I think you're right on the booking. I think booking is a lost art.
Yeah.
You had guys in the 70s and 80s that they didn't have scripts. The booker, assessed talent, and he said, okay, so-and-so versus so-and-so, this is the ending. This guy wins. You guys figure it out from beginning until the ending point, which how long the match was, 20 minutes, half hour. I mean, now it's very, from what I understand and see, it's very, very scripted. Okay, I have to do an elbow drop at this point. I have to punch at this level. You know, you don't see when they're in their ear.
Yeah.
Back in the day when they would get real close to him and say, okay, I'm going to do this.
I was just watching, I was just watching WrestleMania 6 the other day, and I saw when Andre the Giant turned on Haku, and they're all going up in the cart to leave, the golf cart with the ropes. And Haku and Bobby are in there. Andre goes up to throw him out, and you see him. He takes Haku by the hair, and he like says to him, I'm going to shove you, I'm going to headbutt you, and I'm going to shove you out. And he pushes him out. And you don't see that because they rehearsed it 6 times before the show. So definitely very, very different for sure.
I think it's a lost art. And I this is the way I like to do these things. I get people on like yourself that enjoy talking about it. And I don't know if it's ever going to come back. I thought maybe when the NWA kind of resurrected before the pandemic, they were kind of going the old school way. They had it in a TV studio. They had David Marquez as one of the announcers. And I enjoy David Marquez. actually he's a Facebook friend of mine, and I follow him, and he's got this thing going with Championship Wrestling, and I'm kind of hoping he goes in that direction of traditional. I don't know him that well. I just follow him. I don't know if you know David Marquez at all.
No, but I think society has. I don't think wrestling will ever be the magic is gone. The cat's let out of the bag.
Yeah.
And people have such a short attention span to be able to, you can't wait a half of a year to blow off a feud anymore. And it's a shame. And people wouldn't sign up to watch squash matches. I think many people say, why would I pay for a ticket when I can sit at home and watch it on the WWE network for $9.95? Well, Peacock for $4.99 a month. By the way, I'm so upset because I loved my WWE network for the old stuff, and Peacock
sucks.
You can't fast forward or rewind live events on certain apps. Saturday night's main event is gone. Of all things, that was on NBC, which, that's NBC. Why is that gone? I think it's because you have Jesse, and there was a lot of things that were said back then that would not be acceptable in today's climate. And they probably either said, okay, we just can't use any of this, or they'd have to mute like every other sentence. It's
beep, beep.
So, but, it's for me, it's been a journey. I'm grateful for every moment. One of some of my best memories are doing those conventions, and not just out front, but being able, again, when I get to go to the after parties and I'm sitting there in a hotel room with Bret Hart and Jimmy Snuka. Like Jimmy Snuka's sitting there. He's got a flight. I wasn't involved in his booking or anything, but him and his wife, Carol, became friends of mine they're from the same area, and I met him through Bill. But, there were several times where Jimmy, who liked, God rest his soul, loved to drink, which Jim Ross and Bobby Heenan say chocolate cake. He loved drinking and having a good time. And so Carol would call me like 1 a.m. saying, you got to get Jimmy to his flight. He's got a flight at 5 a.m. or whatever. And I'm like, Carol, I can't do anything. This guy, because Jimmy was, and this is all out of love and fun. I'm not saying this because he was violent or anything, but Jimmy would mess with you. Like if you said, Jimmy, you got to go, your wife is going to be mad. He'd like chop the crap out of you. But those moments, and you just can't recreate that. Sitting in those hotel rooms and being part of that with the people that you grew up idolizing on TV. You just, I think I've lived out all of my dreams, and and now I get to be part of Bill Apter and Ken Resnick and Manny Fernandez telling their stories, and stay tuned. You never know who else will add to the fold.
Yeah, I would have been starstruck every time I was with one of those guys or any of those guys that you were around. I would have been in awe and starstruck, and I would have been a gopher. They said, go get me something to drink. Okay, I'll go get something to drink. Whatever you want.
I think, and not to take us off track, Brian, but I think that's why we were so successful, because I was on the inside, but my premise and my team's premise, and I, as the leader of that little team, my thing was, don't play that game. We are here to do a job. And if you show that, then you won't. I think the fact that we didn't play the game, they respected us because we weren't there asking for autographs. We never asked for a picture. We never were the money marks that were I probably did get drunk a few times and buy a couple of rounds, but they knew that we were respected. We had a drive time radio show in Philadelphia, the 5th or 6th major market in the city, in the country at that time. And we didn't pander. And I think that was important. And and I think that's why we were successful. And like, if you look at Conrad, that's probably why he's successful too, because he didn't. I mean, I know he got into it because of connection to the Flares and that sort of thing. But I think he does a really good job, or at least portrays that he's not a mark. He's not like a fan, and I think that's for any podcasters out there that are. If you want any advice, that would be my thing, is don't let the fan take over.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing people, you're doing a job, and you don't want it to look like you're starstruck. Because if you look at all the great shows out there, none of them get like that. So, that was anyway, tangent, but
no, that's good advice. It's good advice. My first one with Greg, I'll be honest, I was a little starstruck because my first
it's
one,
hard not to be.
Yeah, I was starstruck. And then as I went along, I'm personable with people that I talk to and stuff. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, you're awesome. I was professional, and luckily for me, when I started with Greg, he kind of gave my name around to a couple people he knew, like Jim Brunzell and Ken Patera and those guys, and it worked out. So, it's been great. I want to ask, what are you doing now? I know you're doing the VOC Nation. I know you do other things. What other projects are you working on?
Well, those are the 3 shows I do: are Wrestling with History and No BS with the Bull, both on VOC Nation. I run day to day and bankroll VOC Nation, for better or for worse. And Telesystem, so I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at Telesystem. So essentially, I'm the Chief Executive in the front office, so sales, marketing, product development, and that's a telecom company nationwide. So and that's 90% of my time, right?
Yeah.
Business time. And so that drives me. In that world, in that telecom world, we started Next Generation Leadership with Micah Rosales Peterson, who was part of my organization at Telesystem. She just left to take another opportunity, but we'll still do the podcast. And that's grown. See, for me, I'm not passionate about wrestling as much as I used to be, but I'm passionate about leadership. Yeah. And it was a great opportunity to be able to do a podcast that would get visibility and have it be in my core competency in life right now. So I'm very passionate about leadership. I love I've been at Telesystem 5 years now. And this is my 3rd year in this C-level role, but I just really have a passion for growing and developing people, and that's at my heart. And so that's what I'm doing anyway. And my family is important to me. So the pandemic, as bad as it is, it's allowed me to spend a lot more time, less travel, more time at home with the kids and my wife. This is my 3rd try at marriage and my final, and I'm blessed that everything happened the way it did, because it wouldn't have happened if it didn't happen. If the hard times didn't come, the good times wouldn't be here.
That's exactly. Yeah. I'm on my 2nd. I've been married to my wife for 18 years. It was a rough ride the first time but it all works out. It does it for a reason. And now I'm more blessed than I deserve to be, like you. And I really enjoy it. Well, Bruce, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Thank you again for coming on Bumps and Thumps. If you want to, real quick to the fans out there, VOCNation.com, you can find all their podcasts, YouTube, and all the podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, they're on Twitter and Facebook at VOC Nation.
It's all one feed, so that we're different from, like, Conrad has a different RSS feed for every show he does, and there's value to that. What we generally do, and this helps our advertising way, is everything's on one feed. So it helps when we sell our numbers to advertisers. It's all lumped together. When you advertise on one show, if you advertise on Manny Fernandez, you get Bill Apter too, or Shelly Martinez, or Maestro, or I don't want to leave anybody out. Sassy Steffi's with us, Maestro, Shelly, Manny, Bill, Ken, and I think that's it. Brady Hicks from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. But it's one feed, VOC Nation Wrestling Network. You can find that on YouTube as well. And then we do, similar to Conrad, we have commercial-free audio and video at patreon.com/VOC Nation.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank you, Mr. Bruce Wirt, VOC Nation man, and thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Bruce.
Brian, best of luck to you. God bless and good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.